In a cold police station holding room, a racist cop humiliates a calm black woman by shaving her head in front of nervous rookies. His arrogance fills the room while she sits unbothered, until she delivers a chilling promise that cracks his confidence and hints at who she really is. "We don't keep stray dogs with wild hair in my cells." Sergeant Ray McConnell's words dripped like acid, bouncing off the concrete walls of the dimly lit holding room. His fat fingers squeezed a buzzing pair of clippers as he loomed over the seated woman, a black woman in her late 30s, wrists cuffed behind a cold metal chair bolted to the stained floor. Her name, at least to him, didn't matter. Not tonight. Two rookie officers leaned silently against the wall near the door, eyes wide but mouths locked shut. They'd seen drunks, they'd seen fights, but this was something uglier. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, humming in rhythm with the clippers. Dust floated in the stale air like ash. Sergeant Ray took a step closer, pushing his bloated shadow across the woman's face. Her hair was rich, coiled, natural, a crown she wore even now. Spine straight, despite the cuffs biting her wrists. "Bet you think you're better than me, huh?" he sneered, voice thick with beer and stale coffee. "Walking in here like you're royalty. Not in my station. Not tonight." She didn't answer, didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed steady on the cracked mirror bolted to the wall. On the other side of that mirror, she knew, someone else was watching. She wondered if they'd have the guts to step in. She doubted it. The rookies exchanged nervous glances. One of them, Jenkins, cleared his throat, but quickly looked down when Ray's eyes snapped to him. "You got something to say, Jenkins?" "No, Sarge." "Good. Then watch and learn." He flicked the clippers to life. The buzzing filled the room like a swarm of hornets. The woman's eyes didn't waver. The blade touched her temple, a vibration. Then the quiet rip of her hair parting ways with her scalp. A thick, tight curl dropped onto her shoulder. Then another. They tumbled down her front like dead leaves. Ray pressed the blades deeper, the teeth scraping skin. "You people think that hair makes you special," he muttered, voice low enough for her alone. "Makes you better than the rest of us. Not tonight." Outside the door, a muffled phone rang at the front desk. The rookies stared at the hair gathering by her feet, dark against the pale concrete. She inhaled slowly, a breath as steady as the second hand on the grimy wall clock. Even as tufts of her hair piled up, she didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't give him a shred of the shame he was hunting for. Ray leaned in close, breath hot and sour on her ear. "Look at you now. Look in that mirror. What do you see?" Finally, she turned her eyes to him, calm, unblinking. Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to cut glass. "I see a man hiding behind a badge because without it, he'd be nothing." Ray's jaw clenched. The rookies froze. The mirror on the wall reflected the raw circle of scalp Ray had carved through her hair, a cruel patchwork that looked like an old battlefield. "You think you're clever, huh?" He pressed the clippers to the top of her head. More curls fell. They landed on her knees, stuck to the cold sweat of her skin. "Don't worry," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "When you're in front of the judge tomorrow, you'll wish you'd never opened your smart mouth." Her lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. She lifted her head, hair half gone, dignity somehow untouched. Her eyes found the clock behind him. "In 3 minutes," she said, voice calm as the grave. "You'll wish you'd never touched me." Ray snorted, flung the clippers onto the metal table so hard they rattled. "You threatening me now? Who the hell do you think you are?" The woman didn't blink, didn't move, just that calm, patient smile. "1 minute down," she said softly. 2 to go. A muffled shout echoed from the hallway. Footsteps, a door slammed. The rookies shifted again, uneasy, sweat gathering on their brows. Ray opened his mouth, ready to bark at them to stand still, but the woman's words pinned him in place more than any pair of handcuffs ever could. Beyond the cracked mirror, a uniform moved, someone finally daring to look at what he'd done. Ray took a step back, heartbeat drumming in his chest, louder than the buzzing clippers ever did. He felt the first flicker of doubt, but he'd buried his conscience years ago, or so he thought. The woman lifted her chin. A single curl slid from her shoulder to the floor, landing soundlessly on the pile. Her eyes didn't leave his face. "Tick," she whispered. "Tock." The second hand on the cracked clock swept past the big red 12. The pile of curls at her feet seemed to grow darker under the harsh fluorescent light. The buzz of the clippers had faded, but its echo lingered in the rookies' minds, like a hive of hornets, still trapped in the room. Sergeant Ray McConnell wiped the back of his neck with a trembling hand. He felt sweat pooling under his collar, dampening the crisp uniform he wore like armor. His eyes flicked to Jenkins, who shifted his weight from foot to foot, boots squeaking on the concrete. "You hear that?" the woman asked, voice soft as silk but sharp as broken glass. Her gaze was fixed on the steel door behind the rookies. Ray sneered. "Hear what?" She nodded slightly toward the hallway. Beyond the thick door, muffled but unmistakable, came the sound. Heavy boots pacing, stopping, pacing again. A presence. That didn't belong to the silence Ray had demanded here. "Your clock's running out." "Sergeant," she murmured. Ray's lip curled into a snarl. He stepped forward and gripped her by the chin, thumb digging into the soft skin under her jaw. He hated how calm she was, hated that even half-shorn and cuffed to a chair, she stared at him like a man already judged. "You think you scare me?" he hissed. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "No, I think you scare you." The rookies exchanged glances again. Jenkins cleared his throat. "Sarge, maybe we should shut it," Ray barked, dropping her chin. He turned to the rookies, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "Nobody opens that door. Nobody says a damn word. You hear me?" Jenkins nodded, swallowing hard. The other rookie, Alvarez, avoided his eyes entirely, pretending to study a stain on the wall. The boots outside stopped. Silence pressed against the door like a held breath, then 3 sharp knocks. Firm, deliberate. Ray froze. The woman tilted her head, just slightly, her exposed scalp gleaming under the flickering light. A single bead of blood welled up where the clippers had scraped too close. "Tick," she whispered. The knocks came again, harder this time, the door rattling on its hinges. A voice followed, deep and controlled. "Sergeant McConnell, open up." Ray's throat tightened. He forced his shoulders square and barked at the door. "Occupied. Come back later." A pause. Then the boots shifted again. Whoever was on the other side wasn't leaving. The woman breathed out a quiet laugh, low but unmistakable. 2 minutes. Ray spun on her. "Shut up." She met his eyes, unbothered by his fury, his badge, or the faint tremor in his fingers. "You still think your uniform makes you untouchable?" Sergeant Jenkins whispered urgently, glancing at the door. "What do we say if they come in?" Ray ignored him. He leaned in so close the woman could smell stale cigarettes on his breath. "Say one more word." "I'll." Another knock, 3 times, like a gavel on a courtroom bench. The rookies flinched. "McConnell." The voice was closer now, pressed against the steel. "I know you're in there. Open the damn door." Ray's lips twisted around words he didn't dare say. He turned his back on the woman and strode to the door, jabbing a finger at Jenkins. "You stay by her. Don't let her speak." Jenkins nodded, but his eyes flicked to the woman's face. She met his gaze, steady, silent, but heavy with something he didn't understand yet. Jenkins felt it coil in his gut, that something terrible was about to break open. Ray cracked the door an inch. A blast of colder air spilled inside, along with a glimpse of dark blue uniform. Lieutenant Carmen Torres stood in the hallway, tough, square-shouldered, eyes hard enough to dent steel. Her glare cut through the crack in the door and stabbed straight into Ray's excuses. "What the hell's going on in there, Sergeant?" Ray forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Just handling a non-compliant suspect, ma'am. Routine." Torres leaned in, her boot wedged in the gap before he could shut it. Her eyes darted. Past him, she caught a sliver of the woman in the chair, the shorn hair on the floor like a pile of evidence. "Routine, huh?" she said, voice dripping disbelief. "You mind stepping aside?" Ray hesitated. Behind him, the woman spoke again, soft, deadly, unstoppable. 3. Ray's neck snapped toward her. Torres caught the word to confusion, flitting across her face before settling into something colder. "Sergeant Torres said," voice dropping low. "Open this door." Ray's breath caught in his throat. Jenkins backed away from the woman as if she were a fuse about to ignite. The boots outside shifted again, more footsteps now. More uniforms drawn by the scent of something rotten. The door swung wider, and all the lies Ray had built started to leak out like stale smoke. The door slammed open with a sharp bang that made Jenkins flinch back so hard he nearly tripped over the pile of curls at his feet. Lieutenant Carmen Torres stood framed in the doorway, her shadow stretching across the holding room's filthy floor like a blade. Her eyes snapped from Ray's sweating face to the woman bound to the metal chair. The towel of curls scattered, like a slaughtered crown, the buzzing clippers still humming on the steel table. Ray opened his mouth. Lieutenant I. Torres cut him off with a glare sharp enough to strip paint. Sergeant McConnell, step away from her. Ray's mouth worked uselessly, but no words came. Behind him, the woman tilted her chin. Even with raw patches of scalp showing, she held herself like a queen wearing an invisible robe of power. The rookies froze against the wall, as if by pressing their backs into concrete they might vanish altogether. Alvarez looked ready to faint. Jenkins just stared at the floor, cheeks pale. Torres stepped further in. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a gunshot in the stifling silence. "What?" she said, her voice deadly calm. "Happened here." Ray let out a shaky laugh. She was resisting, non-compliant, mouthy. "You know how they get." Torres's eyes cut to the woman. "Is that true, ma'am?" The woman's lips curved. Not quite a smile, more like a private verdict read aloud for the guilty to hear. 3 minutes, she said softly. Ray stiffened. "You shut your damn mouth, Sergeant," Torres barked. Her tone made Ray flinch like a whipped dog. "Do not speak." A heavy pause thickened the stale air. Somewhere in the hallway, boots squeaked. More officers drawn by the storm. They could feel gathering behind this single steel door. Torres stepped closer, ignoring Ray altogether now. She crouched to meet the woman's eyes at her level, her badge gleaming under the harsh light. "Ma'am, I need your name." The woman's gaze flicked to Jenkins, then to Alvarez, then, finally, to Torres. Her voice was calm as glass. "Judge Amara Lewis." Torres's breath caught. A beat of silence slammed through the room like a dropped stone. The rookie's eyes snapped to her, shock widening their faces, as if they'd just realized they'd been standing inside a live electric fence this entire time. Ray's lips parted. "Judge, what the hell?" Amara's eyes found his beeve, even cuffed and shorn. Her stare held enough weight to crush what was left of his bravado. "I asked for a phone call," she said, voice low but clear. "I asked for my attorney. You said I didn't need one." Ray sputtered. "You never. There was no." Torres rose slowly, every line in her face drawn tight. "Sergeant McConnell, step away from Judge Lewis. Now." Ray didn't move. He looked at Torres, then the rookies, then back at Amara, as if searching for a life raft in a sea he'd never learned to swim. Amara's mouth twitched again, that almost smile that wasn't mercy but a promise. 3 minutes, she repeated, this time for everyone to hear. That's how long it takes to ruin a coward's kingdom. Torres looked at the floor, at the curls like scattered evidence, at the blood-specked patch on Amara's scalp. Her fists clenched at her sides. "Jenkins," Torres snapped, her voice a whip crack. "Unlock her." Jenkins nearly dropped the keys, fumbling them from his belt. His hands shook so badly he missed the cuffs on the first try. He forced himself to breathe, eyes darting from Amara's calm face to Ray's draining color. The cuffs clicked open. Amara didn't flinch as the metal fell away. She rubbed her wrists, red welts already blooming on the skin. She didn't look at Jenkins, didn't thank him. She didn't need to. Ray backed up a step, then another, until he bumped into the steel table. The buzzing clippers vibrated next to his elbow, an accidental metronome to the panic pounding in his veins. "This isn't," he stammered. "You can't." "I didn't." Amara stood, rising from the cold chair with a grace that made the rookies stand even straighter. Her half-shaved head gleamed under the flickering light. Not a mark of shame, but a brand of what he'd done. She stepped closer to Ray, so close he could smell her calmness, feel the chill of her power seeping through the cracks in his uniform. "Shaved my head to break me," she said, voice soft enough that only he could hear. "All you did was free me." Torres looked at the rookies. "Escort Judge Lewis to my office. Now." Jenkins and Alvarez nodded at once, moving quickly to flank Amara. Protectors now, though they knew it was she who protected them just by standing. As she passed Ray, she paused a single breath's distance from him. "When the mirror cracks," she whispered, "the whole house falls." And with that, Judge Amara Lewis stepped through the door, leaving behind a man who suddenly realized his badge weighed nothing at all. The hallway outside the holding room felt colder, brighter, more real than the stale air behind that steel door. Judge Amara Lewis stepped forward, flanked by Jenkins on her right and Alvarez on her left. Two rookies trying to look like shields when they'd been complicit shadows only minutes before. Torres followed close behind, boots echoing on the polished concrete floor. Officers at their desks froze mid-sentence, mid-sip of burnt coffee. Mid-lie they told themselves about the job they'd sworn to do. One by one, they turned to see her, the half-shaven woman, whose eyes held more authority than their entire chain of command. The clatter of keyboards stopped. Phones stayed cradled in palms, unanswered. A single fluorescent light flickered above the squad room, buzzing in time with the heartbeat pounding behind Torres's ribs. Judge Lewis moved, like she hadn't just been humiliated in a concrete box. Her chin stayed lifted, spine straight, wrists marked with raw red circles. Her hair, or what was left of it, did not hide her. If anything, it made her sharper, a blade newly drawn. A young officer near the corner cubicle. Morales tried to look away but failed. His eyes met Amara's for a second, and something inside him jolted. Shame, or fear, or both. "Ma'am," he croaked, voice too small for the uniform he wore. Amara didn't slow, didn't answer. Her silence felt heavier than any reprimand. Behind them, the steel door slammed shut. McConnell's muffled curses echoed from inside, but they were just dying embers now. Nobody would shield him. Not anymore. Jenkins cleared his throat, voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, should we?" Amara cut him off with a look, not harsh, but final walk. He nodded, cheeks pink. He'd have to carry the shame of standing silent while a crown was shaved away. Maybe that shame would grow into something useful, or maybe it would eat him alive. As they neared Torres's office, the murmur began. First 2 voices, then 4, then a dozen whispers slithering down the hallway like water through cracks. "In stone, did you see?" McConnell shaved her head. "She's the judge. She could ruin him. She should." Torres pushed past them, keys jangling at her belt. She unlocked her office door with quick clipped motions, holding it open as Amara stepped through. Inside, the overhead lights hummed like nervous insects. A file cabinet rattled as Torres slammed the door behind them. The rookies lingered in the doorway, unsure if they were invited to stay. Torres didn't tell them to go, didn't tell them anything. Her eyes were on Amara, who stood in the middle of the cramped room like she owned every inch of oxygen inside it. A small mirror above Torres's cluttered desk reflected the damage, the ragged scalp, the tiny nick where blood had dried. Amara looked at her own reflection for the first time. Her fingers brushed over the raw patch at her temple. She did not wince. Instead, her lips parted with a breath that sounded like a vow. Torres cleared her throat. "Judge Lewis, don't," Amara said quietly. She dropped her hand, meeting Torres's eyes in the mirror. "I don't want an apology from you." Torres swallowed hard. "I didn't know. If I'd known, if you'd known, you would have stopped him. But you didn't know. That's the problem." Silence settled in the small room like dust. Jenkins shifted awkwardly in the doorway, wishing the floor would swallow him whole. Amara turned, her posture still iron-shod. His internal affairs. "On their way." Torres hesitated. "Not yet, but they'll come. They'll come because I'm the judge," Amara said, voice steady as a verdict. "But if I were someone else, someone without this robe, he'd still be in that room, buzzing clippers over another head." Torres looked down. She had no answer for that truth. Amara stepped closer, standing toe-to-toe with a woman who'd kicked open the door too late. "I want him booked. Tonight. Assault, misconduct, hate crime enhancements, if your DA has any backbone left." Torres nodded once, jaw tight. "Understood." Amara's eyes flicked to the rookies. Jenkins stiffened as if the room itself put him on trial. "You boys know what you saw." Jenkins's voice cracked. "Yes, ma'am." "Then you'll testify," Amara said. "Every word, every detail. If you lie, you're no better than him." Alvarez nodded, his mouth dry as cotton. "Yes, Your Honor." Torres turned away, pressing her knuckles into her desk, as if to keep her rage from spilling out in useless apologies. Amara didn't wait for comfort. She didn't need it. Outside the thin door, the station buzzed with half-formed stories, trembling fears, and the dawning terror that the badge wasn't bulletproof after all. The ripple was no longer a ripple. It was a wave, and it was about to break. The quiet inside Torres's cramped office did not match the chaos brewing just outside its door. Judge Amara Lewis sat in a straight-backed chair by the window, watching the dull city lights beyond the iron bars. Her reflection, half-crowned, half-shaven, floated ghost-like on the glass. Behind her, Torres barked hushed orders into her radio. "No, I want him in holding alone," Torres snapped, voice tight. "Yes, now. I don't care what he says. Get his badge and gun." In the hall, Jenkins lingered by the door, phone clutched like an anchor. Alvarez stood stiff beside him, eyes darting to Torres, then back to Amara, then to the glowing screen in Jenkins's shaking hands. The photo had surfaced an hour ago. A single blurry shot, snapped by someone near booking. Amara seated in that cold metal chair, hair falling in dark coils around her feet. Her chin was lifted in defiance, eyes burning holes through the lens. It took seconds for it to hit local news, minutes for it to spread wider. Now, every phone in the building buzzed. Like a hornet nest. Torres turned, seeing the rookies huddled together. Who leaked it? Neither boy answered. Jenkins cleared his throat, avoiding her eyes. Ma'am, it's everywhere now. Amara's voice broke the silence. Let it spread. Torres stiffened. Your Honor. Amara stood, stepping away from the glass. You can't bottle truth, Lieutenant, not when it stains concrete floors and cheap metal chairs. Jenkins's phone buzzed again. He turned it around to show the headline. Local judge humiliated by racist COP demands justice. Beneath it, Amara's image stared back, half-shorn, half-queen. Somewhere deep in the station, a door slammed. Raised voices clashed behind the walls. Ray's voice, cracked and frantic. He was yelling for his union rep, for the chief, for anyone to come patch the hole he'd carved with his own filthy hands. Amara watched. Torres gathered herself like a woman bracing against a storm. He's inside, Torres said tightly. Have him in interview too. IAS on the way. They'll want you to sign statements tonight. I will. Amara turned to Jenkins. You too, you'll sign too. Understand? Yes, ma'am, Jenkins said, voice barely above a whisper. A faint cheer rose from the street outside. Amara stepped to the narrow window again. Flashing red and blue lights painted the dark street in strokes of chaos. Beyond the glass, reporters clustered under the rusted station sign. Tripods and handheld mics pointed at the locked front doors. They wanted her. They wanted the story. They wanted to make her crown into a banner. Amara's fingertips brushed the window's metal frame. Her voice dropped, more to herself than anyone else. Funny thing about power, Lieutenant, people think it sits on a throne, but sometimes it sits in a barber's chair and dares the whole world to look away. Torres swallowed the knot in her throat. She'd spent years telling herself she was better than the boys like Ray, that she was different. But the mirror of Amara's raw scalp didn't lie. Outside, a lone protester held up a printed photo of the leaked image, waving it like a torch. 2 more joined him. Then 10. Torres's radio crackled. Lieutenant, we got Channel 9, Channel 11, and Citybeat parked out front. They're not moving. Torres pressed the button down. They stay outside. No comment. Amara turned, her eyes hard. No, let them in, Your Honor. That's not let them see. Let them hear my voice, Amara said, calm but unmovable, or else he wins again. Silence is the same knife he used to cut my hair. Torres looked at Jenkins and Alvarez, who stared at the floor like it might swallow them. Her own badge felt heavy on her chest, heavier than it had all year. All right, she muttered. But you stand with me, both of you. She jabbed a finger at the rookies. You answer every question truthfully. If you lie, I know, Jenkins said quickly. We won't. Outside, the chanting rose louder. A beat of anger, shame, and hope all tangled together. A city's buried sickness, ripped raw by a single buzzing clipper in a cold grey room. Amara smoothed a palm over her scalp. The raw patch stung under her touch, a reminder of the wound that was no longer hidden. They wanted to strip my crown, she said, voice low but fierce. All they did was polish it. Torres met her eyes. For the first time that night, the lieutenant nodded, not like an officer protecting a victim, but like a soldier saluting a general. Outside, the glass rattled as the chanting built to a single word. Sergeant Ray McConnell sat hunched in interview 2. His uniform shirt untucked, sleeves rolled up to hide sweat stains that had nothing to do with the stale air. The room smelled of cheap coffee and his own fear. Across the table, his union rep, Dennis Sloan, shuffled papers like a priest fumbling scripture before a doomed sermon. Sloan leaned close, voice low but sharp. You keep your mouth shut, Ray. Let me talk. You don't admit a damn thing. Ray stared at the tape recorder blinking red on the table. His reflection swam in its plastic casing, bloated face, eyes rimmed in sweat and shame. It was nothing, Ray muttered. I mean, come on, Dennis. She was running her mouth, resisting. You know how they Sloane's hands slammed the table, the sound ricocheting off the concrete walls. Stop talking. On the other side of the one-way glass, Torres watched them through folded arms. Beside her, Amara Lewis stood silent, a fresh bandage now covering the scrape on her scalp. She wore borrowed clothes, a plain grey sweater over a black dress, but her posture made them look like robes of state. The door behind them opened. Jenkins slipped in, clutching a printout. He handed it to Torres, eyes flicking to Amara for a heartbeat. She didn't nod. She didn't have to. "It's worse," Jenkins whispered. "It's everywhere. CNN, Channel 5. Some reporter lived tweeting from the parking lot." Torres let out a low breath. "Good." Amara didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked on Ray's hunched shoulders. She could almost hear his pulse hammering through the glass dot inside. Sloane leaned back, fixing Ray with a lawyer's practiced glare. "We'll say it was necessary force, non-compliance, safety risk. You feared lice, contraband, hell, pick something. You just need one reason they can't tear apart." Ray sniffed, scrubbing a palm down his face. "She just sat there, Dennis. Sat there," and his voice cracked. He hated how small it sounded. Sloane leaned forward, voice dropping to poison. "She dragged this out, but you got the shield. The union will raise hell if they try to hang you for this. I've buried worse cases than a haircut." Ray's mouth twisted. Some of the old swagger flickered back, the same swagger he wore like a badge all these years. Yeah, you're right." Sloane sat back, satisfied. He glanced at the glass, knowing they were watching. He wanted them to see his grin, wanted Amara to see the system flex its muscle. Then the door opened. Torres stepped in first, her boots echoing sharp and clear. Behind her, Amara entered like a quiet storm. Her half-shaven head seemed brighter under the flickering fluorescent light. For a heartbeat, Sloane's grin faltered. Ray's eyes darted to her, then to the floor. He shifted in his chair, spine suddenly made of water. Torres stayed standing, arms folded. "Sergeant McConnell, Judge Lewis will make her statement now. You'll listen. You'll not interrupt." Sloane's grin returned, greasy and lazy. She can say what she wants. It's her word against. Amara raised her hand, silencing him with a glance that could shut a courtroom full of liars. She didn't sit. She didn't need to. "When I arrived," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I asked for my phone call. I asked to see an attorney." Sergeant McConnell denied both. He told the rookies to stand silent. "He called me filth, called my hair filth, said he'd clean the cell by cutting it off." Ray winced, but said nothing. "I did not resist," Amara continued, her tone never rising. "I did not threaten. I did not spit or fight. I complied with every order except to be humiliated in silence." She paused, letting her words hang in the stale air. Sloane shifted in his seat, papers suddenly useless in his hands. "When he turned on those clippers, he didn't cut hair," Amara said, leaning forward just enough for Ray to feel the truth. "Sliced deeper than any blade. He cut his badge apart, strand by strand, and now the whole city is sweeping it up." Ray's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Sloane found his voice first, brittle with forced calm. "Your Honor, with respect, this sounds—" Amara's eyes cut to him, and he stopped. She didn't need to raise her voice. "Your shield won't hold," she said, voice soft as a closing door. "Not when everyone's watching." Outside, the window rattled faintly. The chant from the street rolled like distant thunder. "Justice, justice, justice." Torres pressed stop on the recorder. The click echoed like a gavel. "Statement's done," Torres said. "Sergeant McConnell, you are suspended. Badge and gun confiscated. Internal Affairs will escort you to lockup." Ray's face crumpled. He turned to Sloane, but the rep's eyes had already shifted, calculating how far he'd sink if he stayed tethered to a drowning man. Amara turned for the door without a backward glance. She didn't need to watch Ray unravel. She'd written the verdict with his own hands. Behind her, the chant outside grew louder by dawn. The station's cracked parking lot looked like a battlefield waiting for its first clash. Rows of protesters lined the front steps, their homemade signs bright against the grey sky. "Justice for Amara. No, more badges for bigots." "Who's next?" A low news chopper hovered overhead, its blades thumping like a war drum over the city's bruised heart. Every camera lens pointed at the small double doors where the night's shame had crawled into daylight. Inside, Torres stood by the window of her cramped office, mug of cold coffee forgotten in her hand. She hadn't slept. The bags under her eyes felt heavier than her badge, She watched the ripple outside, a chant that kept swelling, breaking against the walls like a tide that refused to recede. Below, Judge Amara Lewis stepped onto the station's cracked steps, flanked by 2 young black women from the local press pool and a handful of community lawyers who'd rushed to stand at her side. Her hair, or what was left of it, caught the early light like a crown forged from a wound. She didn't flinch at the microphones shoved toward her face, didn't bow her head for the cameras that tried to capture every raw angle of her exposed scalp. Torres pressed the palm to the cold glass, watching Amara stand taller than any badge she'd ever worn. Judge Lewis, a reporter called out, his voice tinny through the sealed window. Do you have a statement? Amara's eyes scanned the crowd, the young mothers holding babies on their hips, the students hoisting signs, the old man in a faded veteran's cap who saluted her with shaking fingers. Her voice, when it came, cut through the morning like a bell. My name is Judge Amara Lewis. I came here last night to stand for a young boy wrongfully arrested. Instead, a badge tried to strip me of my dignity, with clippers and hate and silence. The murmurs rose, but she raised a hand and the crowd leaned in, quiet as a courtroom waiting on a verdict. Look at my head, she said, turning slightly so every camera caught the raw patch, the jagged line where power met cruelty. This is not shame, this is a mirror. If you see it and feel nothing, you are the problem. If you see it and feel rage, good, hold it, use it. Inside, Torres closed her eyes. Each word landed like a gavel inside her chest. Amara pointed at the station behind her. This building behind me belongs to the people. So does the badge. If it does not protect all of us, it protects none of us. And I will not stand inside silent courtrooms pretending otherwise. A wave of cheers rose, cresting over the morning chill. Phones lifted high, live streams bouncing her words into homes far beyond the parking lot, far behind the crowd. 2 officers shifted near their patrol car. One turned his back to the cameras, his face pale. The other watched Amara like a man, seeing his reflection in water he'd always kept muddy. Torres heard a throat clear behind her. She turned to see Captain Rendon, the station's commander, standing in her doorway, his crisp uniform wrinkled from a night of frantic calls and half-buried threats from the mayor's office. You see this circus, Rendon grumbled, voice low and bitter. She's turning this place into a stage. Torres didn't answer. Her eyes drifted back to Amara, the lone figure now stepping down the steps, moving closer to the crowd instead of retreating. Rendon rubbed a palm over his jaw. We got IA in the break room, union lawyers upstairs, half the city council screaming on my voicemail. How the hell are we supposed to? She's not the problem, Torres said, cutting him off, her voice flat. He is. Rendon's mouth twitched, but the words died there. He knew. Everyone did. Outside, a young man pushed forward from the crowd, holding up a single sign made from cardboard and black paint. We see you. He met Amara's eyes for just a moment. She nodded once, a judge acknowledging a silent verdict from the people. The chants rose again, louder now. Justice, justice. Amara raised a hand. The roar softened, then stilled. For a heartbeat, the cold morning held its breath. I'm not here to burn this place down, she said, voice echoing off the brick walls behind her. I'm here to remind you it's ours to rebuild. Torres's throat tightened. Beside her, Rendon turned away, muttering curses under his breath. He could already feel the storm pulling at the rotten foundation beneath his boots. Amara stepped back from the crowd, but the crowd surged forward, peaceful but unstoppable, wrapping her in a circle of human shields who would not let her stand alone ever again. Inside, Torres watched the tide rise higher than any door they could bolt shut. Outside, the city exhaled and prepared for what came next. Ray McConnell sat alone in the same gray, holding cell where he'd once tossed people he called trash. Now, the cold steel bench bit into his back, the flickering bulb overhead casting his reflection in jagged shadows across the painted cinderblock walls. Outside the locked door, voices murmured low, tense, no longer laughing. Once, when he barked an order, those voices snapped straight. Now they kept their eyes down, stepping round him like he was a stain someone else would mop up later. His badge sat on the metal shelf across from him, sealed in an evidence bag. The brass looked dull, its edges chipped, a piece of cheap metal, stripped of every lie he'd hidden behind. He pressed his palms into his face, trying to scrub the night away. but the image wouldn't leave. Amara's head, half shorn under the buzzing clippers, her eyes like a courtroom that needed no jury. Down the hall, the break room turned makeshift IA war room, buzzed with activity. Papers stacked high. Union reps huddled in corners. Lawyers shuffled by with forced calm that cracked every time a phone dinged with a new headline. Torres stood at the center, one hand gripping a file so tight the edge bit into her palm. She'd been up for 30 hours straight, running on burnt coffee and the cold rage that simmered every time she pictured the towel of hair at Ray's boots. A young investigator from Internal Affairs, Patel, stepped closer, flipping through a battered notepad. He spoke in a low voice meant to stay contained, but every word spread like gasoline on the station floor. 6 complaints buried, Patel said, tapping the page. 3 excessive force, 1 internal harassment, 2 disciplinary waivers pushed through the union rep. Sloan again. Torres's jaw tightened, and nobody saw this coming. Patel shrugged, shoulders tight. They saw it. They just didn't want to look too close. A bang echoed from the hallway, Ray's boot against the cell door, a pathetic bark that didn't carry the same weight anymore. I need my rep. I want my rep in here now. Nobody rushed. Nobody snapped. To attention, a rookie carried a stale cup of water to the bars, sliding it through without a word. Ray snarled but took it anyway. Even a man stripped of power gets thirsty. Outside, the storm still pulsed. News vans lined the street like vultures at a fresh kill. Protesters huddled in the dawn chill, wrapped in blankets, cardboard signs propped beside them like makeshift shields. A woman with a child on her hip held up a sign that read, "My hair is not a weapon." Upstairs, Amara sat in Torres's cramped office, the raw patch on her scalp now hidden under a plain silk scarf. She could have left, gone home, surrounded herself with family, lawyers, supporters, but she didn't. She stayed in this building like a nail no storm could pry loose. Jenkins hovered by the door, unsure if he was still a guard or a penitent. He watched her sign page after page, statements, complaints, formal charges. Each stroke of her pen felt like a hammer driving into the rotten wood of the old excuses. "Your Honor," he asked softly. She looked up, eyes tired but unbowed. "Yes, Officer Jenkins," he swallowed. I just want to say I'm sorry." Amara studied him for a long breath that made his cheeks burn. "I know you are," she said quietly. "The question is what you do with that shame tomorrow." He nodded, head bowed. A knock at the door. Patel poked his head in, file in hand. "Judge Lewis IA would like you to review the timeline." And he hesitated, flicking a glance at Torres, then at Amara. "Sergeant McConnell's union has withdrawn his backing for continued legal fees. They don't want the heat." Amara's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "The heat is the truth, Detective Patel. It burns cowards first." Torres leaned against her desk, exhaustion settling into her bones. "They're going to bury him fast now. The city wants this gone." Amara met her eyes, voice steady. "They can bury him, but they won't bury this." Outside, a new chant rose through the glass, softer than the shouts before, but stronger somehow. "No more silence. No more silence." Torres watched her through the flicker of cheap fluorescent light. "You think any of this sticks?" Amara folded the last page, stacking it neatly. Her fingers brushed the silk scarf at her crown. No shame, just a reminder of what had been taken and what had been built in its place. "It sticks if we hold it," she said simply. "And if we don't, then they'll come for another crown tomorrow." Down the hall, Ray's voice rose again, hoarse, pathetic, clawing at the walls that used to keep him untouchable. But this time, nobody opened the door. When Judge Amara Lewis stepped back into courtroom 6B, the room fell silent. Not the hush of ordinary proceedings, not the bored shifting of lawyers and tired clerks, but a silence so sharp it could split the marble floors beneath her feet. She paused at the entrance for just a breath, feeling the wood paneling, the cold weight of the gavel on her bench. Her bench, no clippers here, no buzzing blades, only the law, and her voice, rows of reporters crammed into the pews behind the bar. Cameras lined the back wall, forbidden once but now allowed by an emergency ruling from the chief judge himself. Public interest, they'd called it. Transparency, they claimed. But she knew the truth. They wanted to see if she'd flinch. If the crown they'd tried to rip from her head still fit, it did. Ray McConnell sat at the defense table, his suit hanging limp off his hunched shoulders. No uniform now. no badge pinned to his chest like an iron spine. His new lawyer, not Sloane, who had scurried away like a rat abandoning a burning ship, whispered something sharp into his ear. Ray didn't look up. Torres stood near the back, arms folded. Jenkins and Alvarez flanked her like shadows that refused to scatter this time. A line of brass from Internal Affairs and the DA's office watched from the side, trying not to look like they were waiting for a hammer to drop. Amara climbed the 3 steps to her bench. Each step felt like a heartbeat, a drumbeat, echoing through the veins of a system that had always assumed her silence was part of its walls. She sat. She lifted the gavel. She did not strike it yet. "Court is now in session," her bailiff announced, voice shaking just enough to betray the weight of this moment. Amara's eyes found Ray's. He did not meet them. He couldn't, not now. "This hearing," Amara said, her voice carrying through the oak-paneled chamber, was scheduled to address the charges brought against former Sergeant Raymond McConnell. Her words dripped into the rows like water, into dry soil seeping into the marrow of every person who'd ever said, "That's just how it is." "There are procedures," she continued, tone calm and judicial but sharp enough to slice flesh from bone. "Procedures to investigate, to prosecute, to sentence. They will be followed." Ray's lawyer shifted, preparing to stand, but she raised her hand, a quiet signal that pinned him to his seat. "But there are some truths that do not belong, only in sealed evidence files and closed-door depositions." A rustle moved through the crowd. One camera zoomed in, her half-shaven head now hidden under a soft black scarf, her crown still visible to those who'd earned the right to see it. "I will not testify as a victim who begs for pity. I will speak as the judge this community entrusted to hold men like this to account." Ray's shoulders curled in, as if he could fold himself into invisibility. Amara leaned forward, voice a soft hammer. "This man, a man entrusted with the authority to protect, humiliated a citizen. He used his badge as a blade, his uniform as a shield, his power as a mask for hate." A murmur rose from the gallery, a hiss of agreement, of anger, of something sharper, but worse than that. "This building protected him," she said, her tone never rising, but cutting deeper with every word. "Files buried, complaints ignored. The silence of those who turned away was the cloak he wore while he shaved my crown." Behind her, Torres shifted the words, cutting her too, but she did not flinch. She knew they were true, and she would stand in the truth, however much it burned. Amara's gaze swept the courtroom, landing on Jenkins and Alvarez. "To those who stayed silent, your silence is evidence. Remember that." Ray's lawyer tried again, half standing. "Your Honor, with respect." Amara raised her hand again, a calm queen silencing a court that had never dreamed she'd wield her own blade. "This hearing will proceed as law demands. He will have due process. But know this, there will be no closed doors for cowards to hide behind. Every motion, every testimony, every record, the people will see it." Ray's head dropped. His lawyer sank back into his chair, words withering in his throat. Amara lifted the gavel. The wood felt warm in her grip, alive. She struck it once. The sound cracked like a thunderclap through the stunned courtroom. "This court stands for all crowns they tried to cut away," she said, voice steady as stone. "And it will not bow." The camera's word. Reporters scribbled so fast pens squeaked on paper. Torres closed her eyes, letting the echo of that gavel settle into her bones. Ray sat motionless, hands limp in his lap. For the first time, he looked smaller than the badge he'd lost. Amara rose, robes flowing like soft armor. The hearing would go on. The system would bend, or it would break. But she would not. Not now. Not ever again. 3 weeks later, the city's air tasted different, heavy with rain and headlines that refused to die. The trial of Ray McConnell had barely begun, but its shadow crawled across every shift, change, and precinct hallway. Officers who once swapped jokes in break rooms now watched their words like glass under bare feet. Inside the courthouse, cameras crowded the marble steps each morning. Protesters lingered long after the sun dipped behind gray towers. Nobody could look away, not now. But Amara did not stand behind a bench today. She did not wear her robe or her black scarf to cover the raw patch grown softer with new hair. She walked alone through Jefferson Park, a sliver of green stitched between cracked sidewalks and brick lorises where mothers balanced hope on tired shoulders. Children played near the fountain that hadn't worked for years, running in circles, laughter chasing the last warmth of spring. Amara found a bench near the edge and sat, hands folded in her lap. She could feel the weight of eyes. People recognized her now, more than before. Not just the judge who signed warrants or sat stone-faced behind a high bench, but the woman they'd seen broken and unbroken in the same night. A young mother with tight braids and a baby balanced on her hip paused near the bench. She hesitated, caught between respect and curiosity. Amara lifted her chin and offered a small, tired smile. The woman stepped closer. "You mind if I sit?" the woman asked. Amara gestured to the empty space beside her. Of course. The woman sat, adjusting the baby's blanket against the breeze. For a moment, neither spoke. The playground noise filled the quiet, kids squealing, swings creaking, sneakers scuffing against cracked pavement. "My mum watched you on TV," the woman said finally. "She cried." Amara turned, eyebrows lifting. "Did she?" She said she never thought she'd see a woman stand like that. Not here, not in this city. The woman's eyes flicked to Amara's short hair, the new soft fuzz catching the early sun. "She said they thought they cut your crown off." Amara exhaled a small laugh, low and warm. "They tried." The woman nodded, lips curving. "She says you didn't lose it. She says you gave it to us." The baby squirmed, tiny fingers catching a lock of the woman's hair. She kissed her child's forehead, eyes never leaving Amara's. Amara looked down at her hands, the faint scar at her temple still healing under new growth. A judge, a woman, a target, a symbol. All true, all hers to carry now, not as a burden but as a promise. She remembered the cold steel chair, Ray's grin, the roar of the clippers, and she remembered the silence that followed, not her shame, but his, the silence that turned to thunder outside concrete walls. The woman beside her adjusted the baby again. "You gonna run for something bigger now? Mayor, governor?" Amara's smile grew. "What if I just keep doing my job? Then I'll vote for that too," the woman said. She rose, balancing the baby, her eyes soft but strong. "Keep wearing it, Judge, the crown, we see it." She walked away into the playground hum, her child's small laughter drifting back like wind chimes. Amara leaned back on the bench, head tilted toward the slice of sky above the courthouse spires. The rain would come soon, she could taste it in the breeze. But for now, there was this small warmth, children playing, a mother unafraid to stand and say, "We see you." Her phone buzzed once in her pocket, a message from Torres. Ray pled not guilty. Trial date confirmed. Full open trial. No deals, good. Let the truth stay lit, even if it burned more people before it cleansed the rest. Amara slipped the phone away. She did not need headlines today. Not right now. A child ran past, a little girl with bright beads clicking in her braids. She paused, eyes wide at the half-grown fuzz on Amara's head. "Miss, your hair's pretty," the girl said, shy but sure. Amara laughed, her heart cracking open a little wider. "Thank you," she said. "So is yours." The girl darted away, braids swinging like banners of freedom behind her. Amara leaned forward, elbows on her knees. She closed her eyes for a breath, felt the sun touch the crown they'd tried to cut away. She knew it would grow back stronger, wilder, more stubborn than before. She opened her eyes, her gaze landing on the courthouse dome, peeking over tired rooftops, stone and iron, built to look untouchable. But nothing was untouchable now. A crown wasn't made of gold or titles or robes. It was made of the people who refused to bow when hate lifted the blade. And that crown, once stolen, would never fall again.